Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a video that comes about as a result of a viewer comment that I received recently, and I do not remember the viewer's name. If I did, I would give you credit. I apologize. But in the comment, I was asked if I would compare the velocity that is attainable with 9mm parabellum ammunition out of firearms with different length barrels. And I thought, yeah, I've been wanting to do something like that recently anyway, because I've got a wide enough variety of 9mm chambered firearms that I can go from a very short barrel all the way incrementally to a very long barrel, and we can take a look at the degree of velocity increase, if any, there is from barrel length to barrel length, and also do a comparison in terms of the percentage of velocity increase that we get from the very shortest barrels all the way to the very longest. So in this video, I'm going to be doing just that. I've got a selection of firearms behind me here that I'm going to be showing you in just a moment, and then we'll get into the actual test results that I was able to achieve when I was out on the range yesterday testing all this out. So here we go. One nice thing about this test is it does give me a chance to try out this Garmin Xero C1 Pro chronograph. Watch for a full review of this coming soon. But the first handgun that I'm going to be testing is my Smith & Wesson Model 940 2-inch J-frame revolver. Now, since this is a revolver, it is going to lose a little bit of propellant gas through the barrel cylinder gap right here, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the velocity results with this particular handgun. Next up will be my IWI Masada Slim or Masada 9S, and this has a 3.4-inch barrel. Now, some of you might be thinking that's a pretty big jump to go from the 2-inch barrel revolver to the 3.4-inch barrel of the Masada 9S, but the first inch or so of this barrel is taken up by the chamber, so the portion of barrel that the bullet actually travels through is only about 2.5 inches. So we're really going from just a 2-inch barrel of the revolver to about a 2.5-inch barrel here. Next will be the Ruger RXM with its 4-inch barrel, and you've been seeing a lot of this handgun lately. As I mentioned, you're probably going to see a lot more of it because I'm using it for quite a bit of optics testing. From the RXM, we'll move on to the 4.6-inch barrel of my IWI Masada Tactical, and then the 5-inch barrel of my Canik SFX Rival Darkside. Then we'll switch gears and go to the 8.9-inch barrel of my Military Armament Corporation Mac 5. And we'll finish things up with the 16-inch carbine length barrel of my Kel-Tec Sub 2000. The ammunition for today's test will be Blazer Brass 115 grain full metal jacket ammunition. This has a manufacturer's velocity rating of 1,145 feet per second, so we'll see how close we get to that in all these different firearms. Before we take a look at the velocity results I was able to attain with these firearms, I want to make a couple of quick points. First off, this is not exactly the best way to go about determining the velocity of a particular load through longer and shorter barrels. Probably the best way to do that is to start out with a relatively long barrel and determine the velocity of that load through the long barrel, and then incrementally shorten that barrel and determine how much the velocity changes as the barrel gets shorter and shorter. When you use different types of firearms like I'm doing here, you introduce other variables into the equation. Different things like the barrel manufacturer, the quality of the bore, the dimensions of the bore, the type of rifling, whether it's polygonal or cut rifling, whether it's a rough bore or a smooth bore, all of those things can have a bearing on the velocity reading that's attained when firing that load out of these different firearms. Whereas if you had just one firearm and you're using one barrel, then you would have a constant, that being the barrel that was being used, as opposed to using different ones for this. But I think this will at least give us an idea of what we can expect when we're firing a particular load, in this case Blazer Brass 115 grain full metal jacket ammo, out of different length barrels. Also, I wanted to say that we had an unseasonably warm day here yesterday. It was 50 degrees, which is a pretty good temperature for testing ammunition. So it was not extremely cold like it was a week or so ago where it was hovering down around 0. And I think we're not going to see the results skewed much because of the temperature either being very low or very high. The other thing is I took the target that I was shooting when I was recording the velocities, and I measured the groups that resulted on there. Each one of these have 3 shots that were fired through, so I have 3 shot groups for each one of these firearms. And I'm going to show you the results of the accuracy, But much as with the differences in the firearm when I was talking about the barrel, these also have very different sighting systems, grips, triggers, etc., etc., etc. So the accuracy results are really more or less just for informational purposes, except for when I compare the handguns to the shoulder-fired platforms, because I think there we can actually draw some conclusions about the shootability and relative accuracy of the more stable shoulder-fired platforms as compared to the handguns. So with that all out of the way, let's take a look at the results I was able to achieve. First up was my Smith & Wesson Model 940 revolver, and for its 3 shots fired at 25 yards, it had an average velocity of 1,022 feet per second, which translates to 267 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. And all in all, I didn't think that was too bad for this little wheelie. Looking at its accuracy, now keep in mind, we're talking about a double action only revolver with a simple fixed sight. The rear sight is just the groove in the top strap of the frame, and the front sight is fixed to the barrel. And the sight radius is not much, but from 25 yards, it kept 3 shots in under 5 inches, 4 7/8 inches. By the way, ignore these stickers here. I was using this target previously with an AR-15, and I decided there was a lot of good target left, so I was reusing it. The shots for the 940 are here, here, and here, so well centered. One shot's a little bit high, but it's basically right in line with the upper chest / spine area. So again, I was feeling pretty good about the performance of the 940. The velocity and energy I thought were respectable for a firearm like that. And I thought that gave us a good starting point to see where we were going to go as the barrels get longer and longer. Next up was my IWI Masada Slim, or Masada 9S, and with its 3.4 inch barrel, the average velocity for 3 shots was 1,078 feet per second, with a kinetic energy of 396 foot-pounds. That was a 5.5% increase in velocity over and above the 2-inch barrel of the 940 revolver. So we are seeing an incremental and really I would say proportional increase in velocity. And taking a look at the accuracy I was able to achieve with the Masada 9S from that distance of 25 yards. Hopefully you can see those on the target here. I've got 2 shots close together here, one of them down lower in the target. Those 3 measure 5 inches center to center. And this low shot could have been my fault. I might have pulled that one a little bit low. I was shooting with gloves on, as you saw in the video. Even so, that's not tremendous accuracy from 25 yards, but it's still certainly acceptable defensive accuracy. I wouldn't want somebody shooting at me with that handgun from that distance, or any handgun from any distance as far as that goes. But even with the diminutive Masada 9S, I think that's still not half bad accuracy. And as I said, the accuracy results are really just for informational purposes, so take these all with a grain of salt. On we go to the Ruger RXM with its 4-inch barrel. For its 3 shots, the RXM averaged 1,132 feet per second, which translates to a muzzle energy of 327 foot-pounds. In terms of velocity, once again, that's a 5% increase over and above the 3.4-inch barrel that we saw with the Masada 9S. And in terms of accuracy from 25 yards, the RXM had a 3-shot group that measures 3.5 inches, so not bad, fairly respectable. And if you saw the accuracy test that I conducted on this handgun a while back, you know that it's capable of some pretty good accuracy with ammunition that it likes. So now it's time to move on to the 4.6-inch barrel of my IWI Masada Tactical. Let's see how it did. With the Masada Tactical, the 3 rounds fired averaged 1,139 feet per second, which translates to a muzzle energy of 331 foot-pounds. That's only 7 feet per second faster out of the 4.6-inch barrel of this pistol than the 4-inch barrel of the Ruger RXM. So in terms of percentage, that's less than a 1% increase. Actually, it's 0.8% increase in velocity over the 4-inch barrel to the 4.6-inch barrel of the Masada Tactical. And for accuracy, the Masada Tactical fired a pretty respectable group just over 3 inches. In fact, it's 3 1/8 inches center to center from that distance of 25 yards. And I was glad to see that. I'm a fan of the Masadas, if you can't tell by the fact that there are 2 of them represented here. And I thought that was a pretty decent group that it fired from that distance. So now it's time to move on to the last handgun in the group. This is going to be my Canik SFX Rival with its 5-inch barrel. And I was curious to see if we're going to get a velocity increase this time around, or if, much like we saw from the RXM to the Masada Tactical, if we're going to see it remain pretty consistent. Let's find out. So the 3 shots from the Rival Dark Side averaged 1,145 feet per second. So that's only 6 feet per second more than we saw with the 4.6-inch barrel of the Masada Tactical. That comes out to a 0.6% velocity increase. And from the 4-inch barrel of the Ruger RXM, that's only a 13 foot per second increase. So we're staying very, very consistent from 4 inches to 5 inches. As I said before, the Blazer Brass ammunition is rated from the factory with a velocity of 1,145 feet per second, which was exactly what we saw out of this pistol. And that's basically where we are from 4 inches to 5 inches. So anywhere in that range of barrel lengths, you should see about what the manufacturer's suggested velocity is for at least this particular ammunition. Looking at the accuracy from the SFX Rival, this pistol, folks, is quite simply the most accurate 9mm polyframe striker fire handgun that I own. And it continues to demonstrate that every time I shoot it. From 25 yards, I've got a group that is under 2.5 inches. This is 2 3/8 of an inch center to center, well centered in the target. And that's just what this does over and over again. With ammunition it liked better, it would do even better than this. Now it's time to move on to the shoulder fire platforms. First up is going to be my Military Armament Corporation Mac 5 with its 8.9-inch barrel. Let's see what happens to our velocity with this thing. The 3 shots from the Mac 5 averaged a velocity of 1,221 feet per second for an average kinetic energy of 380 foot-pounds. So there we're seeing a pretty substantial increase in both velocity, which was over a 6.5% increase over and above the 5-inch barreled Rival Dark Side, and also energy. So once you step up to a platform like this, even with something standard pressure like the 115 grain Blazer Brass ammo, the bullets are hitting much harder because they're moving much faster. Looking at the accuracy, now keep in mind the Rival Dark Side had, what did I say a moment ago, a 2 3/8 inch group. Without even trying too hard, the Mac 5 has a group that measures 1.5 inches. 2 shots went through essentially this same hole, and then one of them is right above. So when we think about the increase in both effectiveness and accuracy and shootability moving to the shoulder fire platform, I think it underscores something that people sometimes miss when they're thinking about a defensive firearm. Now, you're not going to be able to carry something like this while you're going about your day, so for CCW use, something like this is probably going to be out. But more for home defense, when we look at the shoulder-fired platforms, they are more shootable for more members of the family of different statures, etc., 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 and they are more effective when we're putting shots on target. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a home defense firearm. I just thought I would throw that into the video while I was covering this part. The last firearm that we're going to take a look at is my Kel-Tec Sub 2000, if I don't put out a light, with its 16-inch barrel. Let's see how it did. The Sub 2000 registered an average velocity of 1,325 feet per second, which computes to 448 foot-pounds, and that is an 8.5% increase in velocity over and above even what we saw in the 8.9-inch barrel of the Mac 5. So when you step up to a true carbine length barrel, we definitely see an increase in velocity and therefore energy. I realized while editing this video that I had neglected to show you the group that I fired with the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, so I'm taking care of that right now. Here is a photo of the target, and the Sub 2000 was definitely the winner in terms of accuracy at that distance of 25 yards. It turned in a nice 3-shot, 3/4 inch group, And the Sub 2000 is actually zeroed at a distance of 50 yards, so the fact that it's a little bit low is consistent with its zero. So I was very happy to see that performance from the S2K. To conclude all of this, I'll bring the entire chart up on the screen. Focusing in on just the handgun portion of this chart for a moment, we can see from the 2-inch barrel of the Smith & Wesson 940 all the way to the 5-inch barrel of the Canik SFX Rival, there was a 12% increase in muzzle velocity, but that only translates to 123 feet per second. And while that's measurable, it's not really all that much. And once we got to the 4-inch barrel of the Ruger RXM, from 4 inches to the 5-inch barrel of the Rival Dark Side, there was only 13 feet per second in muzzle velocity increase. So I think it's safe to say that, at least with the 115 grain Blazer brass ammo, that once you reach 4 inches of barrel length, you've essentially achieved the potential of that cartridge until you get to substantially longer barrels. And when we get to the 8.9-inch barrel of the Mach 5, now all of a sudden we see a 19% increase in muzzle velocity and an attendant increase in muzzle energy over and above what we saw beginning with the 2-inch barrel of the Smith & Wesson 940. Moreover, when we step that up to the next level of the 16-inch barrel of the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, we now see almost a 30% increase. So from 2 inches to 5 inches, and particularly from 4 inches to 5 inches, we're not seeing a tremendous difference. But when we really start to stretch out these barrel lengths, now we see a substantial difference. And even going from just the 5-inch barrel, going from essentially the highest velocity of these standard handguns to the carbine length barrel, we see a 16% increase in velocity. So once you really start to stretch those barrel lengths out, we do see an increase. Now, I'm sure you would reach a point of diminishing returns if the barrel got long enough that the friction in the barrel started to overcome the volume of expanding gas. We would potentially even start to see those velocities come down some. But at least out to 16 inches, we're still seeing increases in muzzle velocity and energy. So there you go, folks. If you like this content, let me know. I can do more of this. In fact, I can test other loads in the 9mm firearms. I also have other cartridges I can test in this same way. So if there's enough interest and this video gets enough views, I'll do more of this. If not, then you might never see it again. But in any case, that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember to stop by my website, hrfunk.com. Take a look at the news and information page to see all the latest things that are going on with me and the channel. And also go by the product page. A lot of the manufacturers whose products I've reviewed here on the channel have links on that page, and there is information below those links that will save you some money if you decide to make a purchase from any of those manufacturers. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.